Group Lead and for Data and Automation at Spark Business Group is Kallol Dutta. Here's Kallol. Give him a round of applause. Tell us about your journey, Kallol.
Hello, everyone. Post-lunch slot. It will be a fantastic slot. The beach ball will probably get us going. Thank you for that. So the topic is our journey. So since there is a word journey, I'll take you through time and see and sort of explain how we work towards being more data-driven. And the interesting part is that in 2019, when our data journey sort of started, we all had data for years or decades, but this is where we had a realization that we are missing the bus. And why? We had a spaghetti architecture. We had 5 of everything, and it was difficult to get any insights easily. On the other hand, we could see the world changing about data and AI at that point of time, with Google's and Uber's bringing data-driven models in their businesses. So at that point, there was a question from board, and which went to the leadership team, is can you make data the source of competitive advantage? And to be fair, that they did a really big step. They made data as one of the core pillars of Spark strategy for the next 3 years. And the idea was we will invest in data and champion the use of data, but that came with an accountability. And the accountability was to deliver significant value through data in the next 3 years. And this is the story of what we did in last 3 years and what's coming next. So with the investment, being a technologist, we started looking at what is changing. First change was the models were getting really was getting better at an exponential scale. So as an example, like this is a usual machine vision example of understanding a dog versus cat, but a cat and the litter and their various life stages, these were getting better, this around 2020. Around that time, the computing power suddenly had become exponential with the introduction of GPUs. Now, what is a GPU? Is graphical processing unit, which was used in gaming, but it became very relevant for AI. And the third thing was the data which was available for the compute and the models had it increased such that the models could be trained and have language-like capability. And in around 2020, a company called OpenAI built the GPT-3 model with 175 billion parameters. While this was happening, we started looking at ourselves in terms of we had silos of data. Our infrastructure was split across multiple systems and processes. So how do we consolidate that? Then the vision was to create a cloud-based data architecture. So any data architecture starts with sources. So we started looking at sources and designing for future, like real time or batch. But the key focus was to bring the data together and create one view of the customer and one view of the household, because that's where the customers live. And that through data. And that created the basis for using AI and machine learning models to service the customers better, or even offer relevant products at the time they wanted. And this, along with investment in observability, monitoring, traceability, these are all essential to keep the data safe and grow the data responsibly. Now, this started in 2020, and right now, we have probably 1 more year left to move all our enterprise data assets into cloud. And it's been a tough journey, but it has a huge potential, because once you get the data into cloud, it opens you up for the AI use cases, which incidentally all need some data. The other change was happening is the change in the data organization. Now, previously, data organizations will have what we call a service model. Build me this dashboard. OK, I'll go and build a dashboard and come back to you. And we changed the model to, we will not build dashboards, we'll build products which will have a life cycle, which will have an investment, which will have a roadmap, and it will have a P&L. So we moved from being a cost center to be measured on return on investment. And that changed the conversation on data. So instead of being an incremental change capability inside organization, it got to the front seat. The driver's seat was still with the individual business areas, but the front seat to give ideas of innovation and growth. And 3 years later, one of our major products is called BRAIN. BRAIN stands for Build Robust AI for Next Best Action. And that delivered personalization at scale, because it essentially found the customers who are in market, which are essentially only 1 to 2 customers are in the market, rather than targeting the rest of the population, and offering them the right product at the right time. It increased conversion and reduced cost at the same time, and in that timeline delivered around $30 to $40 million of revenue upside. With that, we realized that there is an AI system. And the AI system works like a human system. So humans have sensors, 5 senses. We are taking decisions. We are acting. Right now, I'm using my hand too much. And there is a feedback loop of learning. The AI systems work similarly. There are sensors like IoT. There is decisioning logic like brain, and actuators like where the actions end up. And the signals come from data. We were fortunate that the rest of the Spark also moved along with data to build these foundations. So we had Spark IoT. We had data which can be enabled through Curious. The decisioning logic was with brain, and the actuators had call center technology. But the advantage of bringing those together was to create this framework. And what that does, it helps us to get to what we call as enterprise brain. Why we call as enterprise brain is that system of AI, we want to take the whole of our organization. And that's our next 3-year strategy, that it shows up in consumers and hyper-personalized experiences for them. It shows up for our B2B customers. It can enable our stores or call centers to be more personalized. It helps in network planning on the network side, workforce planning, and also enables us to put the guardrails for AI to be used across the organization. Now, while we did this, there is a word which became really popular in March 2023, because this was March 2023, our vision for future, and that word was ChatGPT, which is a generative AI. And what we realized was that we had AI, which is sort of called predictive AI, which has structured data in tables, and we can use it for personalized experiences, forecasting. But there was generative AI, which has this immense power of creativity. It can create documents, it can summarize, and it seemed like the left brain, right brain combination. The left brain was the predictive AI, and the right brain is the generative AI. And that opens up this huge opportunity to bring them together. So imagine the world where the predictive AI predicts personalized experiences possible for the customer, but the generative AI then can, through, say, voice, summarize the intent and offer that insight that the customer has a broadband issue. So what is the right conversation to have with the customer or at that point of time. There are other use cases of using the documents to generate the insights, but the list is really large. And that led us to thinking about where we get started with generative AI. So this is a very simple interface, which is what we call a Spark GPT, which is the chat GPT, but inside Spark, but it is safe. The data doesn't go anywhere. The data is contained inside Spark, and it's private and secure. It's a great way to start. But what we are doing next is what we call as AI agents. And those AI agents can then work on Spark data. For example, if you have a question on HR policies, it can give you that information. It can create a purchase order. It can give you, make an expense statement, or it can write an RFP. And the idea is that all of that will be one interface in future. There will be one interface to write in natural language query to ask this interface to let the agents work for you and give that answer back. This is a large journey. We do think it will evolve, and the technology will evolve at a really fast rate. There's a huge investment going in generative AI. But that probably isn't the harder part. The hardest part is the operating model. And what I mean by operating model is, one is the ethical AI principles of, say, inclusion, diversity, having transparency in the model, fairness, bias, checks in the models. And these are sort of hygiene factors in the AI world to incorporate so as to keep the AI safe. But the biggest unlock of value comes in the people and process part. Because the work changes significantly if you have scaled AI function. And you need to redraw the organization responsibilities and ways of working. As for example, privacy ambassadors was a concept we created because privacy team got too many requests and they couldn't scale. So we trained people from marketing, data, product teams to do the privacy assessment themselves with certain tools and processes, which unlocked the privacy teams. Similarly with AI ambassadors, because AI is concept sometimes not known to people working inside the business. So we took some leaders across the business, trained them on AI, and they have the responsibility to translate the AI and then lead the change in their businesses. So before I go, 5 major questions which we get generally, and personal answers for this. There can be other answers, but first question is how do we start? We started small. We picked one use case and scaled it. But we had a vision that when we start, we will have hundreds of use cases thereafter. So we started with one model, we got to 45 models in 3 years, and now we don't have a count because the AutoML generates its own models. But we started with one and picked one major use case, which had an impact. Second is, this is an area which is bound to change a lot. So we need to have flexible architecture, And the next constraint comes data. There isn't enough data, or the data isn't clean enough, or it's not there. So we had this concept of minimum viable data. How much data is needed to land the use case, invest in that, build that capability around it, and then build that infrastructure around it. So build brick by brick. Third is there is risk. How do you manage that? I think the biggest risk is not doing anything is more riskier than doing something and failing. Because the failure has learnings, and that helps in the AI-driven experimentation cycle. Next question is, do we centralize or decentralize? We found centralization useful to get started, get focus, and then decentralize, because that is a scaled model, and it's not dependent on one central capability. And finally, treat ethics and privacy as a capability, not just a compliance need. So investing in that will help us, for some, to even create differentiators in the market. I'm over time, but if I'm to leave one takeaway, that would be is using AI in everyday life helps us to engage, understand, and then take those learnings into businesses, and making people accountable for the change is probably a journey we found very useful to go from a concept to delivering something meaningful. With that, I will thank you for listening to me.